It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Welcome to the show. Today my guest is Stephen Rosen, author, speaker, sales management trainer, and I said an expert on training sales managers. And you can find Stephen online at starresults.com. Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
Morning, Andy. Great to be here, and thank you for the invitation to be on your show.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So rather than have me sort of recite standard biographical information you might have supplied to me, take a minute, introduce yourself to the audience. What do you do? Who do you do it for?
Okay, well, I'm Stephen Rosen. I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and what I do is I work with sales leaders as an executive coach. I also help transform sales organizations through their management teams to become much more focused on coaching and people development, which is the key to driving sales performance.
And what type of companies do you work with?
I do a lot of work in the pharmaceutical area, but business to business, high tech, and I work across obviously Canada, but U.S. and Europe.
So we do let you south of the border.
Yes, yeah, well, some most of my work I do by phone, but definitely, and I always like working in the U.S., especially with the exchange rates.
So let's talk a little bit about you in terms of how you got your start in sales.
Well, that's an interesting question because, as you know, most of us don't say we want a career in sales.
Right?
But I had worked at a pharmacy chain while I was going through school, and when I graduated with my MBA, I thought I'd go and be a financial guru. And in 1990, jobs were hard to come by. We were in bits of a recession, and I had a background from working in a pharmacy to work for a pharmaceutical company, and took a job as a what we call in the industry probably the lowest of the low in sales, which was a retail sales rep.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a retail background. And the company I worked for, Alcon, did not have very much experience at the retail level, but did have a whole bunch of over-the-counter products and helped bring them to a new level.
So what was your day like as a retail sales rep for Alcon?
Retail sales rep. Well, back in the day, as we talk about, I used to visit pharmacies, do inventory counts, come up with suggested orders for replenishing stock, for making sure there was sufficient stock for ads. Speaking of pharmacists, about some of our products which were behind the counter, and
So
printing up an order at the end of the day.
so you sold both over the counter as well as prescription pharmaceuticals.
Correct. Correct.
And so you were, well, I guess they used to call them like detail men or something, didn't they? Used
Yeah.
to go through and yeah, you were checking each store to see what was on the shelf for the over the counter things. And I mean, were you driving a truck?
I didn't ship the orders, but as I joke, because now everyone's on scanners and POS. And in the
Right.
old days, we'd count inventory on use an inventory card, visit the clients every 4 to 6 weeks, and write up an order, have the order shipped. Maybe create some in-store specials, some end aisle displays, and so there was a portion of detailing, which is in pharmaceutical is their term for selling, but there was also some a good portion was transactional sales where we were selling product in and trying to move it out. Uh,
And how many calls a day were you making? I mean, imagine you're in your car constantly.
yeah, yeah, it was probably 6 to 7 calls a day. And 6 to 7 orders a day, which in many cases, it wasn't high level sales, but there certainly was a fun transactional component to it, which no longer exists in the industry.
Hmm. So in working in that environment, was there or maybe it was later this occurred to you? I mean, did you have this aha moment where suddenly sales started making sense?
Well, I mean, the beauty in that area, and again, that was a job that helped pay the rent, and that turned out to be a great job. But I used to work on the opposite side when I was in the retail pharmacy area, where I was a buyer. So I had the beauty of not only understanding sales, but understanding where the buyer came from, and doing their role. It made it very easy.
And so what happened to your career path then?
Well, interestingly enough, like yourself, Andy, certainly that was a entry level job, and it was a great job actually. Probably tons of freedom. But within 7 years with the company, I had seven different positions. Doing specialty pharmaceutical selling, and then I went into management as regional sales manager, and then got promoted to be national sales manager, and then took over marketing and became a business unit manager, and then vice president of sales and marketing, I guess, of our OTC division. And then not that it's a long, lengthy list, but every area that wasn't performing well sort of came over to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I then ran the pharmaceutical plus the OTC, started a sales force to go to primary care physicians.
So was that a reward or punishment?
Well, you know how it is in life that sometimes there's go-to people,
Right?
and you keep going to them until they drop the ball. Or I think at some point I stopped asking for it because certainly I love the opportunities to take on new challenges. I mean, the reality was that I wasn't trained for any of these roles. I never actually did a marketing role, but became VP of marketing. Um, but I guess at the end of the day, if you make things happen, that's one of the learnings that people will go to you, because in many cases, most people don't make things happen in corporations. So I became the go-to guy, and even when I stopped asking, the ball kept coming.
So what is it that you did to make things happen? I mean, what was it that you were doing that others weren't that was creating success and that was attracting these additional responsibilities?
That's a great question, and some of those tips are in my book, and they're not complicated tips. But when you're in the midst of things, you don't really think of what you're doing. But when you take a step back, several years later, there was a couple of walkaways that I realized that helped. Where I wasn't trained, I wasn't really given much guidance. Divisions came over, in most cases, were a mess. And one of my key factors for success was focus. And what I tried to do in every role was clearly understand or define the two or three key things that we needed to do extremely well to be successful. And some of it was asking, the people in the business, sales managers, the marketers, but be very clear on what those key factors were and really focusing on them.
Mm-hmm.
And my belief is, business gets very complicated. The whole key is simplifying and knowing what you got to do really well, and figuring out how to do it really well. To me, is one of the keys to success. That's how I was able to walk in, quickly figure out what need to be done, and do it, as opposed to doing 200 things. It was much more focused on two or three things, and I coach my clients on that. I really do believe that's a really simple yet succinct way to be successful. And I think in many cases people just overcomplicate what they do.
Oh, I agree, 100%. I'd preface my new book. I have a couple chapters on how to simplify your selling along the same lines.
I love it.
So let's talk about this in the case of you've got a sales manager and let's say a small business owner today. They're stuck. They're down in the weeds, right?
Yes, very
So
much so.
what are the tips? What do they do to start elevating themselves to be able to be in a position to have some perspective about what's going on and to find those two or three things they should be focusing on?
Well, I guess it comes over time. I've been in business for I think it's 13 or 14 years now. And of course, one of the key things is continually reinventing yourself, which I know you've done. You've added books, you've added training on. As a small business, I am a small business because, I'm myself, and I've got some internal support as well. Sometimes I'll use outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I guess one of the tips that I share with clients, and I believe helps, is taking your focus and finding the two or three key things that I just said. But I've got a big whiteboard up on the wall in our corporate head office. I'm just kidding about that, but
Yeah, you're speaking from it today, right?
I am from our
Cast of thousands.
Toronto headquarters. And anyways, but one of the things is it's nice to stay being focused. But one of the things I do is I've got a whiteboard that's probably I don't know, 4 feet by 3 feet, and I've got my three key areas that I'm focusing on. One of them is personal, which is better health, which I think
Mm-hmm.
any of us need to focus on.
Right.
And I've got sort of one of the two or three key points that I'm doing along each area, whether it's building my coaching business, developing products for my customers and for the marketplace. So I have those listed in front of me. So every day when I'm sitting at my desk, I can at least glance over and say, okay, what am I doing? I've got a list of initiatives that I'd like to do. And as we realize as entrepreneurs, there's a portion of our time spent on sales. There's a portion of time spent on marketing. There's a portion of time where we spend actually executing billable hours,
Mm-hmm.
working with clients. So the reality is I can only do so much. And, so I have a list of five key initiatives, and probably, the goal is to execute one or two in a year, whether it be writing a book, whether it be, improving one of our programs, whether it be doing webinars. So I really try to stay true to the concept of focus because it's very easy to get distracted. There's always, as my coach used to say, there's always shiny fish that you want to sort of chase.
Right. The bright
And
shining
I've done that,
object.
and I do that continually. But I really try to bring myself back to the core. Remember what's going to help my business long term, and as well as short term, and really stay focused on those areas. So, as a small businessman or someone who's looking at coming out of the corporate world and starting their own consulting, coaching, training practice, it takes a lot of discipline. And I really do believe it takes a lot of focus to be able to effectively do a few things really well.
Yeah, I agree. And I love this idea about the whiteboard because it's such a low tech
Yeah.
tool,
It's actually very empowering at
but it
times.
is very empowering because it's sitting there staring at you. I think one of the things with to do apps on your computer or phone is that you turn them off, they sort of go away. You don't see them unless you call them up. But a whiteboard, that's just there. You're looking at it every day, and there's nothing wrong with resorting to, well, again, low tech but extremely effective methods for
Oh,
reminding yourself what you need to be doing.
it's true. We should make a whiteboard app, right?
Oh, they exist, yeah.
That displays on your wall.
Well, that's true.
But again, even when you're crossing things off or sitting down and there's numerous things to do, I think it helps. And again, even when you're in the corporate world, the level of things that are coming at you, and I coach many executives, and the overwhelm factor really begins to set in, where you've got highly capable people, yet there's just too much minutia coming at them.
Right.
And I think we all face that, whether it be, the folks who get 200 emails a day and are basically, incredibly bright people who can impact their business, the world, but are tied down to trying to answer those 200 a day. And then, of course, another 200 come the next day. And we all know why, people in the post office go postal, because the mail just keeps coming and coming and coming. And sometimes, some folks who, as I said, are, incredibly bright, great leaders, equate their value to how they clear up their inbox,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And if they're not clearing their inbox, they're not doing a good job, and that's sort of my negative side to technology. I mean, without a computer, I'd be dead. But there are some low tech things that I think work, and I think one of the things with the whiteboard is there is a power of putting pen to paper.
Yep.
So when you actually write, there's lots of things that bounce around in our heads that we want to do, that we're thinking of doing, but until you put it to paper, it's one step closer to making it a reality.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Absolutely. So, question for you is, you had all these management positions, working your way up the chain. What was the single biggest sales management mistake you made?
I don't know. Uh, I mean, interestingly enough, one of the biggest mistakes I made early on in my career was I opened my big mouth in front of the president of the company. Early on, and criticizing a few things that were wrong.
You're saying honesty is not always valued.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing was, well, yes, yeah, honesty is not always valued, but what I do find is, in many cases, our biggest strength is our biggest weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And my ability to verbalize and vocalize things help me move forward in life, but sometimes you got to pick and choose your spots, right?
Sometimes you just got to keep your damn mouth closed.
Yes, and I still make that mistake.
Yeah.
part of what I think I'm paid for is to give people honest feedback in a coaching relationship. And, it's how we do it, I guess, which is key. And there's a relationship of trust, but I don't think clients would continue to come back if I wasn't honest with them.
Right. Absolutely.
So in some cases, I've got to do a little dancing to get out of situations, or spend a little more time speaking if it doesn't come out right. But in many cases, you get a lot of yes people in organizations, and I don't think that's good. You get a lot of negative people in organizations. I don't think that's good either. But the ability to put up logical arguments and have good discussion and being honest, I look at it as a strength. But sometimes, of course, it's a mistake. And,
Yeah, well, sometimes it's not for everybody, right?
yeah,
But I
well,
mean, in sales, obviously, you're trying to become that honest broker, that trusted advisor,
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
and that's it's a key lesson for people to, I think, to keep in mind, is that you might have perceived it as a mistake at the time, but you were being authentic to yourself. And as a salesperson, you have to find that style that works for you, or as a business owner that works for you with your customers, and that's true to yourself.
And you're not going to please everybody,
Nope.
right? And that's the reality. But I agree with you, and I think at the end of the day, as yourself, you're building a personal brand, and it's got to stand for something. And you want to be consistent in terms of who you are and how you communicate and what you stand for. So, it definitely was a mistake at the time. It hurt me from moving forward even faster. But when I moved into senior roles, that skill set, or that mistake that I made, was not a mistake. It was actually appreciated.
Yeah, that's right. It's a virtue at that point, right?
Right. So I mean, that's how life is, right?
Yep. All right, we're going to take a break in a minute here. So before the break, though, Steve, I want to give you a question to think about. And
Okay.
actually, you sort of alluded to it earlier. Interesting. It's almost like you knew my questions ahead of time. So here's a hypothetical scenario. You're a new manager coming into a company that you hadn't worked before, and you have 1 week to make a difference with a new sales team. So what two things would you do that would have the biggest impact? And we'll talk about that after the break. So stay with us after the break, as Stephen Rosen is going to share with us some of his tips for driving improved sales through better sales management. And we'll be right back. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. Welcome back. My guest today is Stephen Rosen. Catch Stephen online at starresults.com. So before we get to the sort of the big question I asked you before the break, let's talk about your business for a little bit. You wrote a great book, 52 Sales Management Tips, The Sales Manager's Success Guide. And you clearly wrote it, to be absorbed in small bites. So give us one of the best tips you had in there of your 52.
Okay. So just to give you some context, my belief is, and reflecting on myself, is most sales leaders, sales executives, sales managers suffer from what I call functional ADD.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's why they're successful, because their minds work fast. So when I wrote the book, it was basically delivering things in short tidbits, which is a different style of writing. But these were tips that I continually shared with my clients. And the funny thing is that every time I'd share one, there's like the greatest thing since sliced bread.
You just thought of that?
And I usually have a story behind each one of them,
right?
In terms of what I did, and because people understand what stories. But so I put that into a book. It's supposed to be fun, quick read, and I think for the target audience, that I go at, which is sales managers, these are tips that are helpful. The book continues to sell well, and although I will not claim it's a novel, it is not. But again, short tips. So one of them that I share on a frequent basis, and if you'll indulge me, I'll tell a bit of the story.
Sure.
But I mean, there's a couple. One I won't tell you about, but I'll just tell you the thing is, I always say where there's smoke, there's an F in inferno, which is one of the tips in my book. So if there's problems going on with a rep and you think there's small problems, it's usually actually an inferno going on. But one of the tips that I find that really help people and clients and folks I chat with is about being proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wrote an article recently about, what happens, you're end of June, first half of the year is done, and your sales are not where they need to be. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that actually my second year with a company I worked for. I was vice president of sales. It was March. We were in the pharmaceutical area. SARS was hitting in Canada, if you remember back in
Oh yeah. Yeah.
1992. Sales were off. So there's not a lot of things you can do as VP of sales to actually, turn sales around. And it was early in the year. But what I used to have is we had sales come in from a third party. There's different measurements of sales. So I would always see sales before anyone else in the organization, before the CFO, before the general manager. So when I looked, March sales were in and we were off. And I thought, shit, what can I do? So in most cases, people kind of hide under their covers and think, oh my God, let's hope nobody finds it. So I sat back and thought, okay, what can I really do? What levers can I pull? And I thought, okay, I'm going to simply do three things. Number one, I'm going to cancel all training. Number two, I had several trainers. I'm going to have them out in the field working with the salespeople, helping coach them, helping improve them. And three, we were having challenges accessing clients. So I was going to create a program to reward reps for finding creative ways to see their doctors, to get into hospitals. So what I did is I marched down. They put me in the far corner of the office, at a corner office, and I marched down to the general manager's office and my boss, I guess at the time. And I said, look, I'm concerned about sales, and I'm going to do three things. Number one, I'm canceling all training. Number two, the trainers are going to be out in the field. Number three, we're going to create a contest to reward reps for finding access to clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I left. And I had a tough ass boss who was, a driver, but he also wanted to always know the details.
Yes.
So you couldn't just get by with your wonderful personality. In disc profiling, he was a DC, which is one of the toughest profiles to manage. But in essence, what would have happened if I didn't do anything, I'd get a call the next day saying, what's going on with sales? Or he'd come down to my office, what's going on with sales? And in most cases, you don't really know the answer. Right? You got to dig deep to find the answer. So for me, what I call that is the preemptive strike.
Right.
People want to know two things. Bosses always worry, right? Number one, that they worry, if there's an issue, if they find an issue and you haven't said anything, which then they wonder, are you on top of your business?
Exactly.
Two, if you identify an issue but you're not doing anything about it, they wonder, what the hell is he doing? So my simple preemptive strike is, hey, if there's a problem, identify it. Come to your boss with a plan of action, be, emphatic. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and make it happen. In most cases, then they'll go to marketing as opposed to sales, saying what's going on with marketing, because they're always going to worry about something. So if you can proactively manage your boss in times when times are good, when you're off on sales, whether you're a sales rep, sales manager, it's always about having a plan. People want to know that you're doing something about your issues. One, that you know them, and two, that you're doing something about them. So if you notice you're off, you're much better to disclose it and say, this is what I'm going to do about it, as opposed to someone coming to you.
Yeah, and I think it's a great approach, because too often when you hear this term, managing upwards, managing your boss, there's a slight implication in there that, you're sort of trying to massage things, right?
Yeah.
And it's really the opposite. You're coming clean and you're being forthright, but you're coming with a plan. And you're just, as you said, you're doing it preemptively.
And I think that's the key to success. One of the keys to success in sales. It's not the only key, but the fact is, if you're being proactive, then people, say, hey, the impression is you're on top of your business.
Well, and I think it's a lesson for salespeople as well, not just for sales managers. I mean, salespeople, if you're behind the eight ball, so to speak, it's March or it's April and your prospect list looks slim. What's the plan? Don't wait for your boss to come to you.
Yeah. And if you come with the plan, the fact is what they're going to do is they're going to go elsewhere. Like if they have concerns, the concern is not with you, it's going to be someone else.
Potentially, right. And in your plan that you give them, you're going to give them checkpoints that you want them to come back and check with you. Come check with me every Friday, see how I'm doing, or every Tuesday and Friday, how I'm doing, because you want to make sure you add that level of accountability back to yourself.
Yeah, and in fact, the better thing is to preemptively tell them what's going on,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I said I was going to do this. This is what's going on. As I think in most cases, people worry, right? That what's going on here, what's going on there. They're overwhelmed. So, I mean, if you're on top of your business, people don't worry about you. They let you manage your business.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
If not, then they're always sticking their nose in and micromanaging you. So the one lesson that, not even the question, but one of the tips or one of the best lessons that I share with folks, and it is really about being proactive and being on top of your business. And if you do that, in most cases, there's always going to be issues in business, in sales and
Yep.
management. But if you're on top of them and you have a plan in place, people will they'll empower you to run your business. If you don't, then all of a sudden you're perceived as not being on top of your business, which means you're the problem.
Exactly. So, good tips from Stephen Rosen's book, 52 Sales Management Tips, The Sales Manager's Success Guide. Check it out on Amazon.com. And so, back to the question I asked you
Oh,
before the break.
yes.
So, you're a new manager to a company. You've been brought in to have an impact. You have 1 week to make a difference with a new sales team. What 2 things would you do first that would have the biggest impact?
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question because it's hard to have impact in the first week. But what I have managers do in the first week is meet with each of their salespeople,
Mm-hmm.
get to know them. Don't talk about business. There's going to be plenty of times to talk about business. My belief is you want to build a foundation of trust. Okay, and one of the ways to do that is actually to get to know people, get to know them, get to know their families, get to know their hobbies, get to know what turns them on, what motivates them, where are they at in their career. And actually, one of my good buddies who I worked with once said to me, "People don't care what you know until they know you care."
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the first step for any manager is number one, get out there, meet your people, get to know them as people as a first step. It may not drive sales immediately, but it builds a foundation for trust and going forward. And I guess number two, I mean, is the same one. One and two are the same. No, but no, thinking on my feet here. Number
Right.
two is probably to get clarity with your boss as in terms of what are expectations. Even better if you want to spend the time developing a plan, what you're going to do your first, second week, your
Mm-hmm.
first month, your first 2 months, your first 3 months, and running that by your boss. So you have a 30, 60, 90-day plan of action, which manages upward saying, this is what I'm going to do. Again, it's all about a plan and being proactive. And from a people perspective, I really think it's critical that before you start to manage people, you get to know them from a personal side. Again, forming that or building that solid foundation of trust, because you can't coach, you can't manage if there isn't trust in place.
All right. Perfect. Okay, we're going to get into sort of the last segment here. Get some rapid fire questions for you. One word answers would be great, or you can elaborate a little bit if you want to. No problem.
Okay.
So, what's the most powerful sales tool in your arsenal?
Wow. LinkedIn.
Okay. Name the one sales tool used today for sales management that you can't live without, besides your whiteboard.
That's a great question. Pass. No, there isn't a lot of great software. I'm looking at a great software piece for management.
Uh-huh.
I won't say what it is, but from a management perspective, there's a lack of good apps to support coaching and managing people. There's one that I'm looking at now, so I won't say it. I mean, from a sales perspective, maybe having a CRM like Salesforce is a help, but
You don't, so for you personally, not one right today.
well, for me personally,
Yeah.
Excel.
All right.
It's with you.
Perfect.
I keep things simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, who's your sales role model?
Well, I love Anthony Robbins, so I'm not sure if he's a sales role model, but certainly an inspirational
Okay.
guy.
So, what's the one book that every salesperson should read?
I think it's called Zero Time Selling.
Ah, Yeah, I'm not fishing for compliments here. It's
No,
it is a great book.
I think it's a great book. So, that there's lots of really good sales books out there. I think you've put together a high quality book. So, I have no issue recommending it. And I know I wasn't asked to do this, but I also like Jill Conrath has a book that I use
Which
called um, Snap Selling.
Snap Selling, yep, great
That's
book.
selling to crazy busy executives.
Yep.
I think that that's my challenge, and and so those are
Okay,
my two
perfect.
go-to books.
So your favorite music to listen to psych yourself up for a sales call?
I like I'm an old guy from the '70s, so I like listening to Queen.
Excellent. First sales activity you do every day?
Um, well, I'm embarrassed to say, but I read my emails every day, but hoping that there's some leads that have come in. But first sales activity is picking up the phone and calling clients, potential clients, doing business development first thing in the morning.
Okay. One thing managers can do to accelerate the pace of sales?
Uh, Really implementing the accountability principle, keeping people accountable to do what they say they're going to do.
What do you do to keep fit and healthy?
I walk. I walk my dog every day. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes at night. But that's the one thing I do.
The one question you get asked most frequently by salespeople?
How can I generate more sales?
And what's the one thing you do every day? Last question. What's the one thing you do every day, either in work or in life, to get better?
Read.
Excellent. Love it. What do you read?
You know what? I get a lot of. I sign up for a lot of newsletters.
Mm-hmm.
Folks on areas like business development, like lead generation, like how to create better webinars. So anytime I'm interested in a specific area of improving, I'll use Google, see what's out there, and there are many bright people who, I have my area of expertise,
Mm-hmm.
who I can learn, whether I'm developing online training, how to be better at projecting on videos, content. So whatever sort of the area of interest for me at the time is,
Yep.
I'll go onto Google and see what's out there. Obviously, books, I get books to read, but I do like the shorter content on articles on how-tos and how to do it better. So again, one of the things I think I mentioned early on in your own business, you need to be continually reinventing yourself and building your brand.
Exactly.
And it takes skills that you don't always, as a one person show. And, sometimes there's opportunities to outsource expertise. Sometimes it's expensive to do that. So in weighing those factors, whether it be, how to build a great website or how to, drive SEO or business development, any of those areas, I'll certainly use Google as probably my number one tool for anything I do in terms of locking into experts and seeing what other people are saying or doing successfully.
Perfect. So I want to thank today's guest, Stephen Rosen. Stephen, thanks for joining us, sharing your journey and your wisdom with us today. Can you tell people how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah. If they want to call me, my number is 905-737-4548. I'm on LinkedIn. My website is www.starresults.com. And I'm across all social media, whether it be Twitter, Stephen A. Rosen. And feel free to reach out, ask questions. I write a blog called the Sales Management Blog, and pump out a monthly newsletter with insights called the Sales Management Newsletter. So feel free to reach out and chat with me. I'm open and love when people pick up the phone and call and just want to talk.
Great. Well, again, I really appreciate you spending time with us today. It's been a great show. Remember, if you're an entrepreneur, you're in sales, and if you're in sales, you're an entrepreneur. So make it a part of your day, every day, as Stephen said, to learn something new to help you amp up your sales. So until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.